If your gut says you know you should do this, you should do it. You can't write good code. If you don't understand the whole business from start to finish, you learn more from mistakes than what you do from getting it right every time.
This is the Future of the Future show. I am your host, Mateo Bervejillo. From a small town in England to the boardrooms of major US media companies, Carl Johnson's story is about betting on growth before the path is clear. In this episode, we dive into the pivotal moments that shaped his career, the lessons learned inside organizations like Sony and Fox, and why saying yes to uncertainty became one of his greatest advantages. We also explore leadership, failure, creative risk-taking, and how great leaders shape the energy of every room they walk into. If you've ever wondered how careers really evolve through leaps, mistakes, and unexpected opportunities, this conversation is for you. Carl, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, Matteo, thank you for having me. Hopefully I can help a few people out and shed some light on how being lucky is better than being skilled, as they say. But, we'll see how we go.
Carl, you moved from a small town in England to building a career in the US. What were the pivotal moments or decisions that made that transition possible?
So I took a lot of thought about this one. And I suppose the most pivotal one was after my first year at university. I was doing civil engineering, and in those days for people who, when we were at school, Matteo, computer nerds were nerds. It wasn't you did sports and that. So doing civil engineering meant I couldn't do socializing, sport, and college because it was 40 hours of tuition and that. So after the first year, I swapped and did marine engineering, which was far more likable, still semi-technical. But the reason I say this is pivotal, because at the end of the degree, which was, well, I suppose 1992 now, the key thing there was that they asked me to do research with the Royal Navy on neural networks. And so that meant I had to learn coding on MATLABs. So all of a sudden, that sort of split-second chance to get out of civil engineering, I got onto a PhD program, which I learned coding, and then I realized, wow, this computer business back in the days was yes, no's, not maybes with AI nowadays. So, that's probably the first pivotal moment I would say that I actually did do it, because I'd done it before, but it wasn't one of those, how would I say, glamorous careers that you went about in those days. And they asked me to do the PhD, which I thought, that's not me. No, I can't do that with these, professors and stuff. But England was going through a recession. So I said, I get paid double and I get paid to teach. You learn some skills and you go out there and no one's done it. So yeah, I partnered with the Royal Navy, so I can't say too much about what we did. But after 2 years, I realized, oh, I quite like this, but I didn't want to do the third year to do the PhD just because then they'd want you to become a doctor and start teaching. And I didn't want to go into that route at that point. I'd realized that I wanted to go into the corporate world. So at that point, I joined JBA Software, which was a big drinks and food software back in the day. I forget what they've moved on to now. And that's another pivotal point where I learned the AS400 and RPG. So all of a sudden, you're in the world that you'd never even heard of before, because I've been on a 486 PC writing MATLAB code in modules. So lucky enough to go there, they taught me AS400, which enabled a move to London. So I moved to London with like a software house. And again, I had two choices. I could go left, I could go right. I went left this time instead of right. Don't ask me why. It was just one of those gut feelings. And that's one of the things that I think I've taught. If your gut says, you should do this, you should do it. And if you're umming and ahhing, you should do it, because you can always go back. We'll get onto that in a while when we talk about the move to the US. So, yeah, I got a great job there, and they had some of the best clients ever. I mean, I get to work at Bausch& Lomb, Selfridges, who was the other one? And HMV. So, you got some interesting big stores there, and you learned different types of business, which was the one aha moment. Because when you write code, you're always heads down writing code, trying to make it look good, and everyone's trying to do that. But at the end of the day, if you don't know the business, you can't write good code. If you don't understand the whole business from start to finish, you can't understand, how does a pair of glasses get from the factory through to the person at the opticians where they pick them up? If you don't understand that whole process, you can't write good software. So another one's in those was, that was the aha moment, because you went from like doing Bausch and Lomb to Selfridges, two different animals. And that's when I thought, oh, I could do this. And around that time, it was coming into the Y2K stuff. So everyone wanted contracting. So at that point, I got a job at Thorn Securities based down in London. And they were on JD Edwards. And so that was a learning curve again for another ERP system. But that's when you learn what the big people use and what those funny green screens mean. So I started contracting there. And then by luck, I bumped into an old friend. This is no word of a lie. I bumped into an old friend. And he goes, "Oh, what are you doing?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm doing contracting down at Thorn." And he's like, "Oh, I got a buddy who does a recruitment agency. He's got plenty of roles open in the city because I know you don't like going out." I'm like, "Oh, okay, here's my resume." And then that was the decision that really took me on the path to the US. So I joined Columbia TriStar Pictures in the UK as a consultant down in Golden Square. And so all of a sudden you're big in an even bigger world, and you realize that you're looking after international territories, 19 AS400s, and then there's still the mothership in LA. And of course, luckily there, I got to travel the world because they had an AS400 in every office. So, I went to Brazil, Miami, Spain, Italy, Brussels, Belgium, Holland, Germany. I mean, basically, luckily got to the only two I didn't go to, which I missed out on, was Japan and Australia. But yeah, I got the rest. So, that then I realized, oh, you get the taste of international stuff. You get out of your little shell, Up until then, what was it? That was like when I was 28, 29, 30, because the Y2K came in then. It was like, oh, I like different cultures. Oh, this is quite good. And then this one's not work related. I actually met my wife there at Sony Pictures, and we started talking about, let's go work abroad for a year or so. And I'm like, yeah, that's a good idea. And then my parents retired. So we bought a place in Spain that we went to 3 times in the end, just because then instead of the call at Sony Pictures was, we're going to go to JD One World, because they just spent 5 to 10 million on upgrading home entertainment into JD One World. And as that project ended, every other entertainment company said, we're going to SAP. So you don't want to be the one stuck out on the end, because then it limits your staff resources, because everyone knows in the entertainment industry, it's very incestuous that at least 10 people at every studio. So if there's a job coming up, you usually get pinged. And, oh, SAP, great. If you say, oh, I know JD Edwards One World, not so good. So I luckily got onto that project, and then they had me over in the States for 2 weeks. I'm like, oh, California's quite nice. This LA is not that bad. Of course, they put you staying by the beach, not like your normal, in a city. And I did the 2-week boot camp course, and they said, yeah, you'll be our international lead, going around the territories, helping them out. I'm so great. Another 2-3 years contract. I'm not going to complain about that. And then they said, we actually need you to come over to the States for 3 months. I'm like, why? Well, we need some help. And I'm like, okay, I'll come for 3 months. My wife then says, okay, if you want to go for 3 months, she was like, we're never moving to America. And literally, this was her state. I'm not moving to America. And this is no word of a lie, as you well know, and as most of the viewers will know. Happy wife, happy life. So, you're like, all right, then I'm just cutting that out. She visited that Christmas, what was it, 2003 at this point. And I was going into work because there was a works thing on, I think it was Christmas Eve. I come back and she goes, we can live here. I'm like, why? I can sunbathe on Christmas Eve. So, it's like, oh, okay then. Let me have another conversation when I go into the office after the Christmas holidays. And then, yeah, we did the summer. I did another trip for 3 months. And at the end of it, because we were wrapping up the sort of domestic phase of the project, I said to my CIO boss, I said, got any jobs over here? And he's like, oh, you'd move? I'm like, yeah, let me see what we can do. Unfortunately, that person got taken off the project and a new guy came in. But then within like 2 weeks, he said, yeah, let's get him over here. This is a bargain. Let's do it. So next thing you know, 2004, we're having a visa conversation in the consulate in London. And April 2nd, 2005, we landed in Hermosa Beach. Um, so that really got me to the US, and we said, well, we'll stay 3 years. And, this goes back to the gut feel I was saying, shall we, shouldn't we? But at the end of the day, we could always move back. There was nothing stopping us move back. So we jumped in, and then I think 2 years in, there was the regional role available or open for offers. And my wife said it's a long commute. So that sealed the deal with staying in the States. So she's not, you're not coming back. Yeah, okay. And so doing the SAP project, I got to know a lot of people. And then oddly enough, I had coffee with the old GM of distribution from the UK who'd moved to the States about a year and a half after me. And he asked me, oh, how's it going? I said, yeah, it's going good. We just had our first child, so I wasn't too worried about work because when you have your first child and no grandparents or friends and family, it becomes a very tiring thing. But, he's 20 and still alive, so I've done my job um, I was happy to have a quiet life at work because I'd been doing 8 till 8 for like 2 years, just getting this project done, just due to the volume of data, the number of integrations. I think there was 20 per company, and we did 35 companies or something like that. So there's a lot to do, and they were all slightly different, which was a pain. Um, so we got that, and then literally I bumped into him, and he said, "Oh, how's it going?" I'm going, "Good." He goes, "Let's grab coffee." I'm like, "Oh, okay, let's grab coffee." That's the first time I've ever heard him say that, because usually he's an Irish guy. He would say, "Let's go grab a beer." And I'm like, So we had coffee. And we just chatted. He goes, "What are you?" I said, "I'm a little bit bored now. Josh is more manageable. Karen's going back to work, so I think, I'm up for my next challenge." And he said, "Okay, I got a meeting with the divisional CIO of home entertainment. I got breakfast with him tomorrow. I'll put in a good word." I'm like, "Well, okay, thanks." I didn't think much of it. I get a call from the CIO at 10 o'clock that following day. "Can you come and meet me for coffee?" I'm like, okay. Met him for coffee. We talked through what I'd done. And because they were still on JD Edwards as their main distribution system, the finance and accounting was all in SAP. They did some accounting there, but it was all more the detail line items and all uploaded. And he goes, "Yeah, it's a shame." He goes, "Oh, we had this manager position that was open for finance and procurement and inventory. Um, but I think we've just handed it to a person." Okay, that's great. I'm like, if you hear of anything, I'll happily do it. Luckily enough, that person stopped the background check, and I went and met with my current boss, who I'm working for at McGraw Hill again. And he goes, "Yeah, great, meet this person." A week later, I'm transferred over into home entertainment, doing finance and inventory again, which I'd done in the UK, but for the whole of home entertainment, which was a different animal again. And this means I'm moving out of more the finance area back into like the home entertainment distribution, manufacturing, all that stuff. So, great. Did various roles there, learned to just say yes to stuff. I know you say that later on, we'll talk more about it. But, and then the CFO of Sony said, "We're going to outsource everything to India. And we're going to restructure the whole IT department." Everyone's looking at him like, "Oh, okay, what's this then?" And so they split people into what they call business relationship managers and application development and maintenance. So there again, I had a choice, left or right. Left, go to the BRM, right, go to there and lead up, home entertainment and television, which expands again. So again, I get that role. And so now I'm dealing with this managed service. So through 2 years of grit, we almost got it to a service, not necessarily managed, but we got there and it saved the company money. And then did various roles there. And then, yeah, 2014, the Sony Pictures hack. Yeah. But that was another pivotal moment where you just got stuck in, did stuff, and you realize you learn more than what you know. And then you pick up stuff like, when you've got 400 plus applications, you don't stick your hand up in the air and say, I'm going to run the white room for restoration. But somebody stupid did in front of you here. So I had to schedule, and, we were running literally, we were sort of running 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. for 60 plus days. I think after the hack, we had Christmas Day off, New Year's Day off, and then I think the next one was the President's Day. We didn't even get Martin Luther King Day off. So, but that taught me a lot. And as part of that, they realized I'd done a lot more on BI. So I got handed BI as well. And then we went through a quiet year because everyone was exhausted and we'd spent all the money. And the CIO suddenly started, you stop spending money. I'm like, oh, you said I could. But yeah, so they tightened the purse strings up. That was good. And then I was sitting there as a VP and I'm just thinking, this is boring. I mean, not boring, but it wasn't challenging. That's the word I would say. They were sort of in a very good groove. We'd modernized a lot of stuff. And I just said, huh. And then I got a phone call from a headhunter. February of 2018. There's a role at Fox that would fit you greatly. And I'm like, okay. Because they wanted to do exactly what Sony had done because they were more onshore based and all of that and hadn't really explored it. So they said, well, you've done it. You want to do it? Come do it for the networks and stuff. And then we'll look at the other divisions. I'm like, okay, let me do that. We exchanged stuff. So I signed a contract in February, but I didn't join till June. But then I forget when it was that they decided they're going to merge or split with Disney. And I'm like, oh, whoa, whoa, whoa. I'm on the phone. Well, you signed a contract, Carl. I'm like, yeah, but that's not the role I was going to do. And she said, no, but we have to do it. And I'm like, okay, I'll come. And luckily enough, I happened to go at the right time and ran the divestiture of Fox to Disney and then ran for 2 years all the services. And Fox was a brand new greenfield site. They gave all legacy technology to Disney. And you started from literally ground zero. Then that was a great thing. And you had to build all this new stuff up. But what they didn't tell you was you had ridiculous timelines that other people had signed up for that were then moved to Disney or let go. So, we had to build the whole legal department in 6 months, which they went from paper to being fully digital with the new head counsel. So that was good. But also for my sins, I don't know what it was. I think the CIO at Fox at the time says, oh, yes, you need to get the service desk because you complained about it the most and you need to do service now. Oh, great. So I inherit the service desk. Never ran a service desk before, but I'm like, hey, I'm gold for it. I complain about it, so I should know what to do. And then was back to do that. We built 3 different service desks over the 3 years just because we wanted to get the cost down and move it around. Who'd have thought I'd build a Genius bar on the Fox lot? So, I mean, it's basically on the back of that, they also gave me the studio lot. So if any of you been to a studio lot, like it's a mini city. You've got stages, you've got hands, you've got props, you've got forklifts, golf carts, food services, air conditioners, solar panels, car park spacing, room spacing, rent, it's ongoings. And, I'm building digital menus for the restaurants. So I was lucky enough to get a very diverse experience again, because you start looking at security badge swipes, what goes on here, this and that. And, it was good fun. And then we ended the 2.5 year sort of Disney cool off period because Fox had said, we're not going to touch TV and news because they were standalone. So then they started merging in TV and news. So I got moved over to the sort of what they called the enterprise side with a CIO based out of New York, but he had news and TV stations, but they wanted all of the end user support to be the same. They didn't have anything. They didn't even have a help desk at News or Fox TV stations before I joined. So there goes another challenge. You get in a room with 17 GMs. They don't care. They only care about their bottom line. And it's like a death by, 1,000 paper cuts. But we got them through. And at the end of that day, it was all good. And then, again, I got to that point where I'd got everything done. There was no projects because Fox was focusing on their streaming service. Well, the streaming service that was not to be with Disney, ESPN, and that until that came in to be one Fox. So that's where they were piping all of that. We got rid of the USFL. So that was another one of my things out. So I was sitting there and my boss at the time said, "So what do you want to do?" And for the first time in my career, I could not answer it. So I gave him the honest answer. I don't know. Which led to probably me getting laid off about 4 months later, which comes as a shock, but also hindsight's a brilliant thing. So you sit back and reflect, you're there as you work, you're answering Slack messages, you're answering messages, emails, you're all over, you're like, which meeting am I going to be late to? That's one of the things I learned. If a meeting finished early, say 3-4 minutes, I joined the other one early. So if someone came on, I wouldn't be stuck doing my email. So that was the one. Yeah. And, we'd gone through COVID and yeah, they said, yeah, sorry, we're consolidating roles, which I'm like, to be honest, I was shocked. But then I was like, tell me the number. Okay, that's a good number. We can work with that. And at that point, that was sort of another pivotal moment. It gave me a chance to, my mother still lives in the UK and she had bad disability and she was still living in the house that she shared with my dad. So I was getting up at 3 a.m. to do all the deetings for that. So actually it was a blessing in disguise, if you want to say. So for the next 3 months, 4 months, I was doing a lot of that. And then I was talking to a lot of my guys at the golf course and a lot of the other guys, and they're like, "Oh, AI." And I'm like, "Yeah, no, I've dabbled with it because we implemented MoveWorks at Fox, which is now ServiceNow something, in ServiceNow employee or something like that. I forget what it's moved to now." And they, he said, "Oh, I've got this idea. Do you think AI could do this?" And I'm like, "Yeah, of course it can." So, house move in the morning, get my mum settled. In the afternoon, I'd still dabble and do technology. I'd, do what we all do, technology. Once you start, you can't stop playing. It's like you go down a rabbit hole. It's like, and you get shouted at your wife that all of a sudden it's 7 p.m. and dinner's ready. And you're like, I thought it was only 2. So I got into doing that and I did a proof of concept for his idea that we've since built a company about and we're about to release it, which was great. And then another person asked me about some stuff, and I said, "Oh yeah, I'll help you out." He goes, "Oh, you're quite good at this." I'm like, "Yeah." So then that's where the fractional CTO slash CIO advisor sort of perked up, and I joined a group, great group, CTOX, looking through the stuff, and I've been doing like 3 or 4 contracts. I've got a good one at my old boss at McGraw Hill, but none of them are full time. So it gives me flexibility that you're not tied to 9 to 5. Obviously, it's a challenge because it's up to you to do the work or get the contract. But if you don't do it, you don't get paid. So it makes life more interesting for me because I'm at that stage where I want to do cool things and work with good people. Like some people, I don't want to work with. I'm not going to work with them. It's like, you meet and greet to do a podcast. If you both don't see there's something between you, you're like, we agree it's not going to work for us. Obviously we seem to have come a good way. And so that's how I ended up where I am as a fractional CTO for a management consulting company, a 4PL, 3PL company, a legal AI company, and doing PMO consultant work at McGraw Hill, doing their WMS. So basically, I've gone straight out of entertainment, anywhere but entertainment. But the key part of me is that these decisions or moments mean if you learn the business, so, I could run a restaurant because I know how they do the food, how they do that. But that's because, they say you've been in media and entertainment 30 years. I'm like, yeah, but probably 5 of those have been spent doing normal everyday stuff like retail, we have a retail shop on the lot. We built a Genius Bar, so we got out that and do seminars. So it's really amazing how you get so many different industries within the entertainment industry. It's not. Producing content. I mean, I think we talked about when we first chatted about what's one of the most interesting things you ever found out. And I was like, well, I never realized that two helmets on an American football field, the defense and the quarterback have speakers in the back of them. But with 15 seconds on the play clock, that cuts out. I'm like, how do you do that? And then all of a sudden it's, Carl, you're responsible for the technology, sideline technology. I'm like, But again, you know, that was another learning curve of how to set up offices like football training camps, sideline, iPads to do replays, coaches' booths, because we were using other people's stadiums, we had to bring our whole equipment in every game, take it down, put it back in, and all that. So yeah, it got me to understand that you don't have to look for entertainment roles. There's a lot more out there. And so, books, 4PL, that could be anything. 3PL, storage, warehousing space. There's a lot of stuff out there that you didn't know you knew, but at the end of the day, like I keep saying, it's just a SKU. It's an item that needs to be moved from point A to point B, and then someone sells it and you get paid. So yeah, that sort of, I think that probably encaptures all the pivotal moments and how I got to where I am today. I can't think of any more, but I would say the first pivotal one, that's the most pivotal one that I didn't know was going to have the impact it did.
I love it. And so you worked at very big companies, right? And you mentioned all of the different opportunities that came through that, learning about so many things, right? About the food business, about football and how they do the whole listening in the field, et cetera, et cetera. So many things that you didn't even think will come with the role. Is that the major thing that you found on these huge environments that could teach you that maybe smaller or earlier roles couldn't? The variety and the amount of things that you could learn?
Obviously, the bigger the corporation, the bigger the company, the more opportunities you have. But I think the key part about it is sometimes you get told to do stuff and you go, yes, boss. And to me, whatever role I've done, if I'm nervous, then that's great because I'm learning. If I'm, I wouldn't say bored, I'd say, not challenged. That's when I start looking for stuff. But there's usually a gap that you can do it. You hand it on and you make sure the person underneath you can take it on. If you want to move on, they can move up. But I think as well, one of the key things in a big company that some people lose, you've got to be known and network, even in a company, not just on LinkedIn and all of that. You've got to be able to have conversations that, if they we did a black belt PM course, I did that course, but then you got to meet people from different divisions. So you got known. If there was, we want to do analysis of where we're at with staffing and stuff, you start meeting with different people and, you put your hand in to do stuff. Like if your boss is out on vacation, you want to be standing when they do the leadership team meeting. So you turn up, with a bit of a cold sweat on the first time you do it. And you've got all these different regional CIOs, divisional heads, and the big CIO and the CFO in there. You're like, what am I doing here? But that teaches you a lot. And I think also like moving from moving from Sony to Fox, that was an amazing culture change. And that's the culture. You've got to understand the culture. And, again, it's the same thing. Make sure you're in the right meetings at the right time and stick your hand out. And if you make mistakes, hold your hands up and tell them when you're going to fix it. And most people are okay with that. I think going back to, media companies, when I was a consultant, I had to watch the EDI. This is how old this is. The EDI invoice feed overnight come in on a, what is it, 46 or 48 modem. It's like making more noise than anything. And the consultant guy that was there before me says, "Thanks for stepping in for me." I said, what if there's any errors? And he gave me a list of errors. And he goes, "Just hit I, ignore." I'm like, "Well, okay then. This is what I've been told." I get in the next day, they're like, "Invoices have been overwritten. What's going on? Was there anything wrong last night?" "No, Peter," that's not his name, by the way, to protect the innocent. "Peter said, if you get any of these, just hit I, ignore." And I go, "So what did you do?" "I hit I, ignore." And they're like, "Oh, what we've done is the invoice header numbers have come back around, so there's duplicates." I'm like, "I thought that's what it meant, but he just told me to hit I, ignore, so it's just doing the thing." Like that guy was gone that day. And then I spent 36 hours nonstop writing code to fix the invoices. And I think I went into the office at 9 a.m. on Friday and didn't get back till 6 p.m. on Saturday without any sleep working through. And the most travesty of justice was I missed FA Cup final day, which is really big in England. Yes.
Ooh,
So, you know,
that's a big one.
so those milestones suddenly teach you to like, don't take for granted what people say. It's like what you say to AI today. Check your work. It's almost like I was foolish enough and naive enough. So that was another big change that, oh, don't trust everyone. They may be right, but you know, it's trust and verify, as my old boss said. So that was another big one. And then, yeah, Fox, they treated themselves like a startup with 12,000 employees. I mean, that's 12,000 domestic employees. That's because they got rid of all of international. You don't understand the size, the magnitude, the amount of work that goes into live productions. Because really, at Sony, they did Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy. Those are sort of the only live ones, but they'd film 10 episodes back to back. So they'd only be doing it for like 2 weeks and they'd be done for the whole season. This is 24 by 7. And you get asked some fun questions. I think we talked about it when we met because ended up, this was a good subject, that an SVP of HR called me up out of the Washington office, out of the DC bureau, saying, "Carl, we've just fired a cameraman. He's got a suburban car and 100 grand of a camera equipment in there. How can I find him? Can I find him on my phone?" I said, "No, that's not allowed, even though it's a Fox phone." And then I said, "So is it a Fox car?" She goes, "Yeah, it's leased." "Oh, if you phone up the lease team, you can do OnStar find my car and you can do it," which she did and did it. But my wife's sitting next to me because it's like 9 o'clock at night. She's like, "How is that your problem?" That's just, I'm like helpful Honda. What can I say? I got known as, if there's a question no one can answer, Carl will find the answer. And having that sort of thing when you're in a company that big, it helps a lot. "How did you solve that?" "Carl did." And so, you know, it's one of those things that if you get in the right environments, you can move around. And accounting's accounting. It's just how you account for it. And Fox does it one way, Sony does it another way. It's still the same principle. So, and you go from home entertainment to theatrical. They're doing, well, not so much DVDs nowadays, digital content, and they're doing digital, but it's still shipping a product, just less here, just more money and more product and the same amount of money. So it's, if you relate to the business, it makes life a lot easier. And it's one of those things that you come in and you got to sit there, get the hairdryer treatment, like we used to say at halftime from our soccer coach. If you've heard of that, the Alex Ferguson, you'd have the business doing that. But as long as you do what you say, you build up trust. And if you give them details that you're going to be late because of so and so, don't do it on deadline day. Do it 4 or 5 days before or as soon as you know, because then they go, "I'm not happy, but thanks for telling me when we're going to do it. What's the impact?" So if you can answer that, you go into meetings prepped and stuff, then the whole mood of the meeting becomes, not, that's what I say, I would say frustrating and stuff. It becomes, oh, okay, then you know what we're doing. You realize you've messed up. We thought this, we made, at that time it was a great assumption. We all agreed, but now this is not true because someone, didn't know about X, Y, and Z. But I think if you're open and transparent in these big roles, people like it a lot better. If you're secretive and don't open up, they always think something worse is wrong than it actually is. So I think in these, even though they're total different environments, speed and all of that, you know, Fox was always, when can we get this done by? Yesterday? No, you just told me about it today. But you give them something, you stick to it. You've done it as long as I have. It's like, when is it going to be ready? And you've just got a one-page requirement, which you haven't even dug into yet, and they want a timeline. And you've got to be also, not afraid to say no. That's what most people don't learn. I can't give you a quote just yet because I need more details. Give me a week to give some more details, and I'll be able to give you a better thumb in the sky, budget, timeline. But I can't do that as of today because I don't know how many systems are impacted. Um, and then the other one that I would always give a top tip in these environments is, say, Matteo, you came to me. Hey, Carl, I got these two items, both for 40 hours in effort. We'll just use that. I know we're not being agile now, but we 40 hours in effort. Can I get them by Friday? And I'll be going, Matteo, sorry, no. I can do one by Friday and the other one by the next Friday. You tell me which one's number one, which one's number two. You do that, and people are far more, oh, okay, I get that. Because yeah, I want this one first, that one second. Then you deliver on it.
Yeah.
In that big environment, you build up trust. And then when you roll out to different departments, you bring your sponsor from, say, entertainment into the sports department. Oh, they've been great doing that. So they become your own cheerleaders.
Yeah.
Then they get it and they explain it. So, um, it's one of those things that it's trust, being open and transparent, and don't hide your mistakes. That's one of the things that really, in smaller roles, you can sort of hide them, but
Mm.
it doesn't really matter because it's only you, so people don't moan. But when there's 100 of you, people are, well, if Carl's doing it, why can't he do it? And it becomes a lot of that conversation. So I think that's what that would teach me is, yeah, stand up, put your hand up in the air, but network in the big corporate office. I mean, I know they say LinkedIn, but if you have a conversation with someone, then they remember a couple of weeks later, 3 months, oh, Carl was interested in doing this. Let's see if he's still interested. I think he'd be a great fit.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, a recurring theme in your story is saying yes to uncertain opportunities. And it feels like if there's a challenge, right, you don't like getting bored, right? So the challenge itself, it's one of the reasons to say yes. But how do you personally evaluate risk versus potential when something new comes along? And when you say trust your gut, what does that mean? And how much information do you think your gut is really processing, even if at an unconscious level, if that makes sense?
Yeah, there's a lot I do unconscious, according to my wife. So yes, um, I think what it is it's not so. I wouldn't call it potential risk because you're taking on. This is where I think when you take on something new and you're getting to understand it, people don't think of it as risk from you. It's like you can do it, learn it, and in all fairness, one of the things I would say is you learn more from mistakes than what you do from getting it right every time. Like you go back to the invoice at Bausch and Lomb, first mistake and last mistake doing that. But until you do risk and do stuff, it's like, you know, when we implemented MoveWorks at Fox, the CIO met with the CEO of MoveWorks, came out and he goes, Carl, that's the Fox CEO. We tried this with ServiceNow agent and it failed miserably. Everybody hated it. I said, John, this is next level. This will be able to do stuff like reset passwords. It's very intuitive. What they say on the video is actually true. We've actually done it. And he was like, okay, then drive a hard bargain. I'm like, okay, John, we'll drive a hard bargain. So we said, They were offering us 12,000 users. I said, but we're going to expand. We need 18,000. Give it me at the same price. And then price per user, Don's not going to look at. Good job he didn't, because then he'd work out the total number if he said 18,000 instead of $22. But luckily enough, that established us that when they came to renegotiate 3 years later, we kept the price flat, added a module, and we said, we just want 12,000 users. So we took a third of the users off and kept it flat. So we kept our support costs flat for 6 years from 2019 to 2025, which is quite impressive considering we started off with 6,000 users. We migrated to 12,000 users when we brought news and TV on. And there was a risk there because, if you mess up, that's your short term is now over. But I think to your point, subconsciously, we knew AI was coming. We'd looked at the tools. This was the best one. They had the most aggressive thing. We could get good pricing. It was compatible with the key tools at Fox, like Box, Slack, Outlook, and all of that. So obviously integrated with ServiceNow, and we were doing a lot of onboarding, which came through that. We did a lot of messaging. So at the end of the day, and I think email messages, I think it's 3%. When you send out a company email, probably 3% read it. But we were doing similar stuff through MoveWorks comms module, and Slack was getting at least 15%. And so, that was risky, but at the time we had nothing. So it was a good time to do it. It's not like, so subconsciously I'm like, well, if this goes wrong, I just add more people to the service desk.
Right.
If this goes right, I don't have to add people to the service desk. And when we go in to have the conversation with news and TV stations, we tell them it's just a flat cost.
Right. You mentioned about learning something from every project. What type of mindset is needed, right? You mentioned, for example, even the time that you were hitting ignore, right? But you learned something from it, right? So what mindset do you bring to the table that you think helps you learn something from everything that you do?
I think when you get feedback, good or bad, it's not personal. It's about your professional behavior or the work you're doing. And that to me is one of the key learnings. It's not that it's personally against you. It's, look, if you screw up, don't start arguing because you're not going to win. Admit you've made that mistake, and I've made a few. Like at COVID, the app wasn't working to get the green screen so you could go in the office, and there's queues 45 minutes down, like Pico Boulevard, which is stopping all the traffic. And yeah, I missed a phone call from the boss, about 20 of them, because I was still asleep because I was absolutely shattered. And I was like, that's the last. I don't put my ringer on silent, but I got that following day. We spent 16 hours on the call with the company, did all this, got it fixed, still got a sort of semi write-up from, my boss. But then the GM of the studio lot said, that's not your fault. That's on my team's fault. So I'll have a word with your boss. So, I think you can't take it personal. It's just got to be, and then you're fixing it. You say you're sending out updates every 2 hours. You do that. And you get out the other side and you learn, maybe I should have had a double redundancy, or I should have confirmed with security, hey, if the app's down, they have a backup plan. What are you going to do? You're going to open another gate? That's sort of on me, but not on me. But it teaches you that maybe you should just double check that your partners on the other side have got you covered if something goes wrong on your side, and vice versa for them and you. So I think that helps a lot, because then you sit in different situations and you can make a more educated decision or comment based on that. The other side of the house is, luckily enough, I've been, in a lot of higher up meetings. You learn how the next level and the level and the level above, you sit in the meetings and listen. So you can learn, how they work. I work at the 50,000 feet. They're probably at 200,000 feet. But you know, you learn how to write a presentation that can go to all levels, not changing based on what level it goes to, which was one of the big things I learned from Fox. So you could potentially writing a PowerPoint presentation that goes all the way up to Mr. Murdoch. So you know, and I think it's yeah, you can learn something from every experience, and also as well, the working world is so big. You can learn something new every day just by passing in conversation of like, you know, how to get a boardroom ready for a board meeting. I'd never even thought about that before. You know, now that was my responsibility. I'm like, why, you know, how do you do executive support of these big corporations? That was on me again. I'm like, when did I sign up for this? You know, that's part of that group. Didn't we tell you? Sorry. You know, so it's it's interesting to say that you can learn all the way and you'll make mistakes, but own them. That would be the one thing I'd say. And you'll learn more from mistakes than what you do. Um, and you know in your own mind when yeah, you know, to your point, I should have hit cancel, not I. You know you should have done that. So there's no point sitting there going, but I told you why I did it, which was the honest thing to do. But you didn't check, did you? No, just did it. So, you know it's your fault, and then you spend the next 36 hours fixing it, which actually the following Monday I got called down to the main office of the consulting company and they said, right, firstly, what you know, did you do? I'm like, I did this, boss. Sorry. He goes, okay. But you screwed up. You admit it. I give you that. But he goes, I will give you kudos because you spent 36 hours fixing it with one of our senior consultants who said, he's never seen someone write such nice code in such a rush and everyone understood it and you fixed the problem. So, you know, whilst there's bad, we appreciate that you stuck around and did that. So at the end of the day, I sort of got a little, you know, a little telling off, but more kudos for doing better. So, you know, that's that, and they'll shape you. Yeah, in some cases, you're like, I don't like doing end user support. I don't want to do this anymore and swap roles. But I enjoy doing it because, you know, you build a procurement system that you ship 5,000 laptops across Fox every year that's all automated. You know, there's stuff there that you don't even think of goes on in, you know, in these big companies because like, you know, if you're in that, I get my machine, I plug it in, I do my job. Do you actually know what it takes to get that machine into someone's hand during COVID when you need to have a direct line of sight onto the network? So, you know, I just rattled those off and that's without thinking about what I've learned and what I did with just doing it, you know, unconsciously, as you say. You just step up, get up, and do it. And so it's one of those blessed or not blessed scenarios that I get put in. And yeah, I just think you can't worry. It's a job. It's not life or death, hopefully. But you know, you get up from it, you correct it, and then you work with the, you know, feedback is good. Say thank you. I mean, because if you carry on acting like that, they're going to say you're out.
Yep, yep. Carl, last question to you. And we talked about this when we were getting ready, and I love this. How do you think great leaders set the tone and energy in a room? And what intentional habits do you use to create that kind of environment?
I think when you're a leader in the room, as you can probably say, I'm always positive and, you know, not stern. You got to set a good mood for the meeting. Now, regardless how your last meeting went, you could have gone in asking for a budget for 5 million and the boss says 2, you know, you got the steam and the red coming out, you know, all that good stuff. You can't take that on to the next meeting. You got to take each new meeting is a new day practically. And to me, I always go in with the glasses half full. We do talk seriously, but also we joke about stuff. You know, it's, you know, we used to, you know, have a friendly joke, but also when you get in the meeting, if no one's there, have a personal conversation. Get to know the team so they know you and be open. And, you know, if your team makes a mistake and you get called out because the big boss man's coming in, you don't point at the person who made the mistake. You don't do this. Yes, boss, as a team, we'll fix it. Or you get the phone call that's going on. let's do this. I thought we'd done that. I thought we'd done this, and talk through like, how do we make the situation better than where we are today? So, and people see that, you know, and because people, as you get higher up, you get more, I suppose, what is it, hard thing, thick skinned, whatever it is. But the people down below don't. They like, you say a wrong word on something and then they're a nervous wreck and then they won't do anything for themselves. One of the things that I got taught by one of my old bosses at Fox was, look, these people are busy. Tell them what the problem is. Tell them what the two scenarios are and which one you're choosing, and let me know if you're wrong. So if people send me that email, it's now on me because I didn't read the email timely enough, and they should have gone A, but they chose solution B. Yeah. So that's on me because they'd asked me and they told me what they're going to do, but I hadn't disagreed with it. So I think that's one of the more positive things is, guys, I'm busy. You've got a solution. What's the problem? Because I've probably not even heard of the problem just yet. And what are the scenarios going to do to fix it? And which one are you choosing? And then if I don't read it in a timely manner, they're often doing it. And then I support them following that. I will then ask a couple more questions. Did we think of this? Did we think of that? Do we need to pivot? And also, as a leader, answer a question with a question.
That one is a one is a
like some say,
powerful
how
one.
would I do this? Yeah. It's like, how do I do this? Well, how did you do it previously? Oh, okay. I'll come back in a bit then. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so that really is, I like to empower people, not micromanage. I think it goes back to, the old AI ad, trust and verify. It's like, human in the loop, as it's called nowadays. But if you build that trust up, people do it, people make mistakes, but then you ask them, hey, how did we get here? How do we not make that mistake again? Now, if people keep making the same mistake 3 or 4 times, that's a different conversation.
Yeah. Carl, thank you so much. This has been an amazing conversation packed with an amazing story, so many learnings, so many life experiences. I appreciate it. I hope that we can stay in touch and do this again in the future.
Oh, for sure, Matteo. Thank you. It's been a great hour of listening to my own voice, as my wife would say. So, yes, so she's happy I'm talking to you and not her. So, great. No, it's been great conversation, great questions, and hopefully people find it useful. And yeah.